All right, everyone, now we have a very worrisome report, which is that there was an internal memo apparently at Google. Now, Google's brushing this off and saying this was just like speculative and theoretical in nature. It's just one of many internal memos. Don't read into it too much. No, this is not what we're actually doing, but it's called the good censor. And the fundamental principle, the fundamental premise of this memo from within Google is that tech firms, Google and others, need to move away from the concept of like free speech and expression and stuff because they become problematic. That is, people are too offensive, it's scaring off advertisers, and what they need to do is micromanage and moderate everything, dumb it down, basically, make it very tame, and provide, basically snowflake safe spaces in order to appease a global audience and maximize revenue. Yeah, you can't get much more dystopian than specifically this internal memo. Now, let me take Google at face value in their explanation. Let me assume for a moment that Breitbart's just jumped the gun here. These other groups, they're basically making a mountain out of a molehill. This is just one of a number of internal memos, and Google itself doesn't actually intend to move in that direction. Okay, that's good. That's to Google's credit. Google needs to understand, though, that people are going to be, I think, rightly concerned, legitimately concerned, when this sort of material is even being discussed at a company that has participated in the depersoning of various individuals at various times in the wake of the 2016 election. What this boils, and it's not just people involved in politics. That's the whole problem. What we've seen lately, the biggest attack lately that we've seen is on a bunch of ASMR artists getting kicked off of PayPal because they do like flirty ASMR, or YouTube setting, not allowing them to do ad revenue because it's too flirty or something. Like they're the butt of every joke, I think, in Silicon Valley right now as far as the fundraising side. Meanwhile, you've still got InfoWars has still disappeared. Alex Jones is still disappeared, depersoned, and delegitimized in every possible way off of the normie landscape of the internet, having, now to regress to alt tech, which is growing, so it's not maybe a bad thing long term. But the fact that that can happen, the fact that Silicon Valley is at this point provably coordinating internally, has gone past being competitive and is now colluding internally in order to micromanage the flow of conversation for political and I think mostly for fiscal reasons, is already concerning enough. We didn't need this memo to be released to scare us into thinking that there's something desperately wrong in Silicon Valley. And insofar as these companies have already begun to crack down on innocuous content that breaks no law and is not legitimately, in some cases, even offensive or fringe, not that it being offensive or fringe is a defense of censoring it, but, it's not even in those categories, not even extremism of any actual political or socio-political brand. The fact that that's already begun to happen, the censorship's already there, means, fuck, I don't care about this memo particularly. That would just verify the slow boiling of the frog-style movement towards dystopian Chinese-style internet policing anyway. Well, I think that personally, I'll say a few things. Number one, when people realize how fucking boring that is, I think there'd be a big thirst for alt tech. I think that the demand for alt tech and alternative platforms would skyrocket. I don't think that such a plan would actually work long term. I honestly don't. Even if Silicon Valley continues to manage to suppress the government through major campaign donations to keep them from cracking down on their monopolies and their trusts and their breaching of the First and Fourth Amendment, even if that happens, I think long term, the more censorious they get, the more likely they are to get fucked, basically. They'll collapse. My warnings to these companies, largely in good faith, are that I enjoy the services that they offer. Like YouTube, I like YouTube. There's a reason I've been on it for 11 years. I don't want to see it flatline. Yeah, I want to see healthy competition with YouTube. I support BitChute. I support Dailymotion. I support DTube through Steemit. I do. Other competitors like Real Video, PewTube, others, VidMe when it was back before it screwed itself. It was very funny. I support that. But I also do like YouTube as a platform. Yes, I've spent a lot of time on it. I've had a lot of chuckles about it. It is a great jukebox as well still and would be even under censorship. The thing is, though, there comes a time at which these companies will be seen as too draconian, to the point where people who before really didn't care about the censorship issue, they're like, yeah, I don't care about politics, I don't care about, e-drama stuff, even they will care. And that's when these platforms can go belly up. When the larger bulk of people recognizes that there is a fundamental problem. The thing is, alt media especially, alternative news sources, alternative styles of education and philosophy, it's Peterson, people like that, have grown astronomically in the last few years. The rate of growth, the total of growth is much higher. The rate of growth is still inclining. The rate of growth, like my channel, I am not one of like the top 10 alternative media commentators in the world. I'm not Alex Jones or something. But I mean, things are skyrocketing. I can't even fathom it. There was never a time before 2016 that I thought I'd ever be anywhere near the point I'm at. Certainly not at this particular time in life. It's like, yeah, 30 years later, maybe I'll see 250,000 subs. I'll see 100 million views. In my dreams, basically, is what I thought. And just think, I know that my appearance and my handle actually hold me back to some degree, so I just think of people who have, like, you know, the regular birth name, they wear the suit and stuff, you know, you can play up to a larger audience. I'm aware of that fact. So yeah, there is no such thing as a good censor. Censorship is evil. Censorship also doesn't work. It's been implemented time and time again through many cultures, many governments, many companies, many groups, many advocacy firms. Everything has tried to censor and suppress. Has it ever once been positive? Can you name for me one example in all of human history, I do mean all of human history, in which censorship and suppression long-term worked at its goals, created a long-term stable equilibrium? And number two, is not seen later on as evil, as corrupted, as something potentially to be avoided, as having been paired usually with various other abuses. That is, it's not, censorship alone doesn't exist alone. It's part of the sort of scope of it's a symptom of the disease of authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is the disease. One of the symptoms is censorship. Another one is political intimidation. We see plenty of that today. I'm telling Silicon Valley, you're promulgating political intimidation. Violence, potentially. Political violence. When you attempt to suppress those who are already outsiders and you alienate them, they revert to echo chambers that can make them more violent. Likewise, those that perceive them as a problem can then justify their own intimidation and violence. We see this every day now. We see calls from people, mainstream politicians, elected officials have called for political intimidation now within the United States. People like Maxine Waters, Hillary Clinton now, has called for an end to civility. No, you can't treat people who are uncivil with civility. Basically, we have to be intolerant towards the intolerant, even if you haven't actually justified the initial label that you're giving. This is a self-feeding, self-destabilizing, cyclical sort of movement that occurs within human culture. Now, normally, in an enlightened society, it's kept at a low level, unless you have massive social stress. You have the erosion of the economy. Half the people are unemployed or something. Okay, that's fertile ground for various socio-political problems. The level of desire for censorship by these corporations that are motivated by money, that's all related to advertisers and stuff like that, but they're not realizing. Let me tell you something. These Silicon Valley firms work together. At this point, they're no longer really competing with one another. They've sort of got a non-aggression pact, which is why I've called for content creators and alt tech to pull together and do the same thing. It allows us to react much more easily. It allows us to be 1,000 times more powerful. We've got plenty of competition that we can do, but there are certain things we need to stand together on. That being said, these groups could also work together to preserve free speech on the internet. They don't have to listen to the advertisers. Look, if all the big corporate tech firms, big Silicon Valley firms, were to simultaneously release like a manifesto and say, no, we're no longer going to police much of the content you want us to police. We can't. It's not feasible and it's not right. We're going to hold to the concept of free expression. We recognize ourselves as platforms. We're exonerated of legal responsibilities beyond making sure to police content that would otherwise be strictly illegal. Fuck yourself. If they were to do that, what would the advertisers do? What, are they going to stop using their services altogether? They could kick the advertisers off their platforms and leave them hemorrhaging money. Silicon Valley is so much more powerful than the travel-related and raw resource-related sort of late 1800s barons of steel, coal, rail, and stuff like that. They were considered, at the time, a whole political and social sub-movement of people, the Progressive Era, arose to tackle the trusts and monopolies of that era. They are nothing compared to what we see now in Silicon Valley. Adjusted for inflation, the wealth held by people like Zuckerberg compared to the wealth held by the big barons, the Rothschilds or Vanderbilts 100 years ago, it's pennies in comparison. There's no comparison. You can't even fathom enough money in a million years. Imagine that your whole house was filled with fucking solid gold. That doesn't even approach the wealth of some of these companies. We're talking trillions of dollars in some cases. In Silicon Valley, Apple, Amazon, Google's fast approaching that market cap too. And Facebook, Facebook and Twitter less so. It's a huge amount of money. We're talking the smaller among them are worth tens of billions of dollars. Individuals worth many billions or tens of billions. You're telling me that we should not hold them to some degree of accountability insofar as they are U.S. firms run by U.S. individuals. They should have a basic dignified respect of U.S. philosophy, including the concept people should speak freely if they're not victimizing others. You should not be participating in ignorance, moral panic. This country was founded upon Enlightenment principles. The idea of moral panic was something they would have been rather averse to. The concept of mass panic, witch hunt style, is sort of a preface to the Enlightenment, trying to avoid shit like that. That's where we're born. These firms see themselves as multinational. That may be true. You're still based in the United States. Obey U.S. law. Police things based on U.S. law. And if the European governments try to throw their big dicks around and try to force you to censor things or give up user data, you should resist that and you should call on the U.S. government to help diplomatically. What are they going to do? What are the European Union states going to do? They're going to magically make alternatives to YouTube and Facebook that'll be heavily censored and that their own populations will never want? That's never going to happen. You know it's never going to happen. That's an excuse. It's using fiscal matters as an excuse to, again, defend yourselves against some of the concerns of your advertisers. Why do you even still continue in this illusion that the ad-driven internet isn't going to be a thing of the past in 10 or 20 years? In 10 or 20 years, the ad-driven internet will be basically non-existent. Things will be powered by the blockchain and cryptocurrencies and grassroots public support, in some cases government funding. That's the internet of the future. The internet of the future doesn't rely on advertisements. We see how well that's working for cable right now. It's not working for cable. There's a reason for that. The internet will fundamentally become like cable if the Silicon Valley firms indulge in this kind of behavior. That is to say that a new internet will be built. It's entirely possible. Look, it's possible to create a literal parallel internet if you wanted to. It's not physically impossible. Why not? Or at least within the internet, you'd have a compartmentalized sort of portion of the internet that was, at every possible level defended against problems. And if the ISPs were to get involved, even the left wouldn't like that. So, you'd look at the domain registrars, payment processors, fundraising, and then the various platforms. It's all you need. Two of those we've already basically got within alt tech. Just need to some better domain registrars and a payment processor now. Problem solved. Who's going to censor you? And the alt tech firms can work together and get this done in coordination with content creators who in many cases feel aggrieved. And that's the other thing. Like Google, Facebook, all these. You need to understand your platforms. You may not publicly declare yourselves to be platforms as opposed to publishers. Okay, you want to keep that a gray area for legal purposes, understood. Your platforms, though. The content that actually drives people to you and makes you money is made by other people. Not your employees, by independent individuals who simply are making videos, blog posts, and everything else under the sun. Insofar as that's the case, and you're alienating large portions of them, that's suicidal. It doesn't make any business sense either. I would like to believe that this is just another one of Google's internal memos, and that you would also, if you read them all, you'd find memos that fundamentally disagree in every way with this one. And then I'm sure that there are internal memos that do. My hope is that one or more of the big Silicon Valley firms will come out very publicly against this sort of behavior. And they'll say enough is enough. We're going to be the good guy in the room. We're not going to start censoring people. We still believe in liberty over civility. By the way, why do I want civility on the internet? Civility is boring. Civility is what I have to go out and see in fucking polite company every single fucking day of my life. I don't want civility. I want to be able to say fuck and weigh in on controversial issues and say controversial, thought-provoking things. And that's what the audience of every content creator wants too. Nobody goes online and says, I want to watch grass grow. Unless they're stoned or they're being ironic or they're just, fucking, there's something very, very wrong with them. 99% of the internet, what is it? It's trolls and raids and porn and weird, edgy humor and stuff like that. That's because that's what's entertaining. It's what's informative too. It's called things that sort of go against the reigning zeitgeist of a culture, that are taboo, are not boring. They're entertaining. They're also more informative typically. You've got some new philosophy like at the time when anything else is the Enlightenment. Great example back in the 1700s. The concept that groups of people, they should be erudite and participate in a sort of meritocratic collective political process. The idea of constraining government, my goodness, people who engaged in monarchism didn't like that idea very much. Oh my God, you're trying to create a government, doesn't have a state church, okay, doesn't have a monarch, and the legislative body has like certain limitations to its features. What are you fucking doing over here? It's like Frankenstein's monster. I think we need much more liberty in the world, not less. That's about all. Peace out.